Section 4 of A Book of Nonsense by Edward Lear. Recording is in the public domain. There was an old person of Burton whose answers were rather uncertain. When they said, "How d'ye do?" he replied, "Who are you?" That distressing old person of Burton. There was a young lady of Norway who casually sat in a doorway. When the door squeezed her flat, she exclaimed, "What of that?" This courageous young lady of Norway. There was an old person of Ems who casually fell in the Thames. And when he was found, they said he was drowned, that unlucky old person of Ems. There was an old man of Apulia whose conduct was very peculiar. He fed 20 sons upon nothing but buns, that whimsical man of Apulia. There was a young girl of Majorca whose aunt was a very fast walker. She walked 70 miles and leaped 15 stiles, which astonished that girl of Majorca. There was an old man of Quebec. A beetle ran over his neck, but he cried, "With a needle I'll slay you, O beetle!" That angry old man of Quebec. There was a young lady of Poole whose soup was excessively cool, so she put it to boil by the aid of some oil. That ingenious young lady of Poole. There was a young lady of Bute who played on a silver gilt flute. She played several jigs to her uncle's white pigs, that amusing young lady of Bute. There was an old lady of Prague whose language was horribly vague. When they said, "Are these caps?" she answered, "Perhaps." That auricular lady of Prague. There was an old person of Filey whose conduct was scroobious and wily. He rushed up a palm when the weather was calm, and observed all the ruins of Filey. There was a young lady of Parma whose conduct grew calmer and calmer. When they said, "Are you dumb?" she merely said, "Hum." That provoking young lady of Parma. There was an old man with a poker who painted his face with red ochre. When they said, "You're a guy," he made no reply, but knocked them all down with his poker. There was an old person of Sparta who had 25 sons and 1 daughter. He fed them on snails and weighed them in scales, that wonderful person of Sparta. There was an old person of Prague who was suddenly seized with the plague, but they gave him some butter, which caused him to mutter, and cured that old person of Prague. There was an old man on whose nose most birds of the air could repose, but they all flew away at the closing of day, which relieved that old man and his nose. There was an old man of Peru who watched his wife making stew, but once by mistake in a stove she did bake, that unfortunate man of Peru. There was a young lady of Turkey who wept when the weather was murky. When the day turned out fine, she ceased to repine, that capricious young lady of Turkey. There was an old man of the North who fell into a basin of broth, but a laudable cook fished him out with a hook, which saved that old man of the North. There was an old man of Aosta who possessed a large cow, but he lost her. But they said, "Don't you see? She has run up a tree, you invidious old man of Aosta." There was an old person of Troy whose drink was warm brandy and soy, which he took with a spoon by the light of the moon, in sight of the city of Troy. There was a young person of Crete whose toilette was far from complete. She dressed in a sack spickle speckled with black, that ombliferous person of Crete. There was an old person of mould Who shrank from sensations of cold, So he purchased some muffs, some furs, and some fluffs, And wrapped himself well from the cold. There was a young lady of Clare Who was madly pursued by a bear. When she found she was tired, She abruptly expired, That unfortunate Lady of Clare. End of Section 4 of A Book of Nonsense, by Edward Lear.